Hello Year 8s and welcome to your final lesson of this year, and this time we have a one-off lesson for you on a 20th century event, and the event is the assassination of President Kennedy. This happened on November the 22nd in 1963, and I'm sure perhaps some relatives in your family will potentially remember it. They'll perhaps remember it on the news, so it might be worth having a conversation with them about it. Now, what I would like you to do then is to put the title, The Assassination of Kennedy, in your book. So pause while you do that, and then we will move on to the lesson. Okay, so to begin with, there are several key words that you may or may not have heard of before, which will crop up in this lesson. I'd like you to perhaps read them out to somebody at home. There's capitalism, communism, Cold War, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, assassination, witness, reliable, president, and conspiracy, and perhaps talk about them and what they mean with someone at home before you start properly on this lesson. And then when you are doing the lesson, every time you use one of these words, I want you to highlight or underline it, please. Okay. All right then, so what happened? Well, there is a little video you can watch if you wish. Okay, so just up here is the video link, all right, and by all means watch that either before or after you've listened to me read through this little part. This will be in the PowerPoint that will be attached to show my homework. So JFK, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, was shot and killed in Dallas, Texas on November the 22nd, 1963. Immediately afterwards, the government set up an investigation. As you can imagine, this was a massive deal, known as the Warren Commission. And it was decided after a long time of investigations that a lone gunman, so a single gunman, was responsible, and his name was Lee Harvey Oswald. It was reported that he had killed Kennedy with 3 shots from a rifle from the top, so I think it was the 6th floor of the Texas Book Depository, which was on the main street in Dallas, just to the side of the street that the president was driving along in an open-top car. So before we start thinking about, who was responsible for the assassination, I want you to kind of understand the events of that day. So watch the video, perhaps read a little bit more about it if you can, before you move on, just to get the feel for the event. Okay, so what I'd like you to do in your books, underneath the subheading of what happened, I want you to write 3 key things down. When it happened, what the Warren Commission decided, and what they reported, which was about obviously Kennedy being killed with the 3 shots fired from a rifle. So you've got just a very basic summary of each of those 3 bullet points. Okay, pause while you do that, and then when you're ready you can move on. Okay, so the question, even to this day, on people's minds is, was it actually Lee Harvey Oswald? Was that a conclusion the Warren Commission came to that perhaps was a convenient one? Or was there more to it? All right, JFK had many enemies. He was obviously the president of the USA, and what he had come into as president at that time was something called the Cold War, and this was this massive amount of tension between the USSR, which is Russia, and the USA, and he kind of inherited this. And there was a particularly bad incident in 1961-62 called the Cuban Missile Crisis, and it nearly turned into a full-on nuclear war between the USSR and the USA, but it was kind of averted at the last minute. Now that was perhaps a possible issue for him, so he made lots of enemies that way. And also JFK was one of the first presidents to announce that he wanted to pass a law that would give black people equality with white people in the USA. And believe it or not, there were a lot of people, particularly in the southern states, who were very much against that, who were very racist in their outlook. And that was perhaps another issue, because he did gain enemies through that issue. He also went against the mafia. The mafia is like an organised crime group, a bit sort of gangstery, and he'd ordered his brother, Robert or Bobby Kennedy, to crack down on organised crime. And the mafia were a very powerful group, all right, and they possibly might have been behind the assassination, and that's some people's theories. The other incident was an incident called the Bay of Pigs, and in 1959 a man called Fidel Castro had become the leader of Cuba. Now, Cuba was it was an island not far off the coast of Florida, so it's quite close to the USA, and the USA and Cuba had been quite close at one time, trading and that kind of thing. But with the revolution that put Castro in leadership there, Castro was a communist, and he wasted no time in quickly becoming friends with the USSR. And of course, in the context of the Cold War, this was an issue for the USA. Now, Kennedy, not long after becoming president, and with the help of the CIA, ordered an attack, on the island of Cuba to try and assassinate Fidel Castro and other Cuban communist individuals. And the attack was launched at an area called the Bay of Pigs. Now, the last minute, what Kennedy did was he pulled an order which would bring in some US air support, and it meant that the fighters for the USA in Cuba found themselves being attacked by Cubans and were killed and captured. All right, and the CIA felt as if Kennedy was blaming them for the failure at the Bay of Pigs, and so therefore there were enemies to be had there. So you can see why it's not just as simple as what it being a lone gunman, okay? But the Warren Commission had said that was the case. But what you're going to do, guys, is you're going to analyse the three suspects, all right? There's a grid to complete, which is attached to Show My Homework, and you're going to give a score based on the evidence you find for the means, the motive, and the opportunity for each of the three suspects. Okay, so this is the grid. You've got one like this, as I said, on Show My Homework. And remember, when you do this, it's not about writing one-word answers. It's about looking at it a little bit in depth. All right, especially those of you going on to do history when you come back in September. This is practicing your historical skills. It's showing as teachers as well, what you are capable of and how much in depth you can look at something. So do give this a good go. Now, in order to do the grid, to fill it out, you have got three interpretations. This is the first one. And when I say interpretations, it's because it is somebody's viewpoint, all right? And if you look at the top of your sheet, it says provenance. And the provenance is basically telling you who has written this particular piece of evidence, all right? The first one, interpretation A, is about Lee Harvey Oswald killing JFK, and you have some information about motive, means, opportunity, and physical evidence pointing to him being the assassin. Okay, so I want you to spend time now reading through that. You can see it perhaps more clearly on the actual PowerPoint itself, on Show My Homework. But I want you to pause this while you study this interpretation, and then you move on to, and then you can obviously we'll move on to the second one. So pause for now and fill out the grid which goes with this. Okay, so interpretation B is that the CIA killed JFK. So it wasn't Lee Harvey Oswald, this is the CIA. And remember, an interpretation is a viewpoint. Now, I want you to have again a read of this one, which is the CIA stands for Central Intelligence Agency. It's a massive part of law and order and enforcement in the USA. It still is. And this interpretation has been put forward by a man called Jim Garrison, all right, who was a district attorney, and he is suggesting that the CIA killed JFK. So again, read the motive, the means, the opportunity, and the physical evidence. Complete your grids on that section. All right, so pause now while you do that and come back when you're ready. Okay, so far so good. All right, so interpretation C is that the mafia killed JFK. All right, and this interpretation comes from an American journalist who has specialized in writing books about conspiracy theories. Okay, so bear in mind in all of these three suspects, who has written it, where has that source come from, because it's really key in helping you as well make judgments. Again here, all right, write about the motive, the means, the opportunity, give your scores, and also of course refer to the physical evidence. So pause now while you do interpretation C. Okay, so you have had an opportunity to look at the all the evidence of all the suspects. You will notice on Show My Homework as well, there is a kind of quite scruffy but scribbled answer sheet. You're welcome to have a look at that to see what sort of ideas you could have included. You would probably have more ideas. And I would like you please in your books to write the question, who do you think killed Kennedy? So you're almost writing your own mini report. Instead of the Warren Commission, you could change it for your own surname. Who do you think killed Kennedy? All right, and in your answer, I want you to give at least 2 reasons for who you have chosen. So if you've agreed that it's Lee Harvey Oswald, why do you definitely think it was him? If you think it was the CIA, why do you think it was the CIA? Okay, so you're giving 2 reasons, not 1, but 2 reasons with some explanation. So you're almost doing a couple of mini P paragraphs, point, evidence, explain. All right, and use the information that you've got from your grid and even look back at the information sheets you used as well. Okay, so take a photograph of your answer and submit to your history teacher, please. That is it for Year 8. We're not setting any more lessons. You will need to make sure, please, that you have submitted this and other outstanding pieces of work, if you could do your best to do that. And obviously, I look forward to teaching a lot of you next year when you start your GCSE history course. Okay, thank you and stay safe over the summer.